Greetings to all in the love and light of the one infinite creator. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I'm one of the facilitators for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found in the list of study groups on the LNL Research website as shown. We can also be found on Facebook if you search for Seattle Law of One study group. We meet on Zoom on Tuesdays from 3:30 to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You don't have to live in the Seattle area to join. Anybody is welcome to join as long as they are interested and available at that time. Just might want to check your time zones to make sure the times line up. This is a new website. We had an older website that is now no longer active. So feel free to search for this website and join if you're interested. Otherwise, we are lucky to be blessed again with our friend Jim McCarty, who joins us for some conversation and some questions and answers about the Law of One and how to apply it to our daily lives. How are you doing today, Jim? Whoops, Jim, your mic is muted. You might need to unmute your mic.
You're right. I don't know how it got muted, but now that takes care of it. I'm doing well, and I'm very honored to be here, a part of your group again. I'm looking forward to any questions that might come my way. Do the best I can to answer, and I'm giving you my opinion. I could be wrong, so keep that in mind.
We always very much appreciate it. I was originally going to ask you about archetypes, but I think given the current events of this past week with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and what seems to be the beating of war drums again, this would seem to be something that is weighing on many people's minds. And wanted to start off asking if you had any thoughts, reflections on what's going on in Ukraine now, and maybe how you see it or how others could see it from a Law of One perspective.
Well, there's 8 billion people on planet Earth. Most of them have come from other third density planets where they failed to make the graduation and they had to repeat the 75,000 year cycle. Some of them came from planets such as Maldek, where they destroyed their planets due to warfare, and Mars, where they destroyed the atmosphere due to warfare. So they've come here to try to make reparations, to go in another direction. There are two directions, the positive and the negative, but according to those of Ra, most of the people from both Mars and Maldek would like to try. And the experience of those in Atlantis is an example of an attempting to try that didn't work too well. So there's been a lot of warlike behavior, what Ra calls bellicosity. And it is very likely that what is happening now in the Ukraine and what has happened throughout the history of planet Earth with so many wars is that these entities are trying to go in another direction, to step back from the brink of destruction. So that's the basic outline. And Ra talks a good deal in the Law of One information in the Raw Contact about how the nuclear energy here on the planet is something that was given by the Confederation in the hopes it could be used in peaceful ways to produce energy that would help people not have to work from daylight to sunset and have no chance to consider their spiritual journeys, provide them with a power source that could be helpful. But as we have on this earth so many times, misused the tools that we were given. That has occurred also with nuclear energy. So one other thing that has a play here is that Ra mentioned that within the inner planes, there are 4 positively oriented fourth density social memory complexes that are having what you would call a battle with 4 negatively oriented fourth density social memory complexes. And this battle is something akin to what might be called the Battle of Armageddon. And Ra suggested that this battle isn't going anywhere for either one. It's a standoff. And there is one beneficial result of this potential battle. And as Ra said, it lessens the chances of planetary annihilation. So we have folks working with us and for us on the inner planes doing this work. So that's the general outline, and there's a lot more that goes with it too.
Thank you for sharing that. I do remember something in, I think it was session 65, where the subject of Russians came up specifically. And I remember something to the effect where Ross said something about, I think, as you mentioned, nuclear war would not be in anybody's self-interest, but conventional war, on the other hand, I believe they actually said that in some ways, at least, this could be considered beneficial for our spiritual growth evolution, in the sense that it would cause people to reflect on how to live in freedom or under control, and perhaps be catalyst to get them to look inward towards their own spiritual growth evolution. Am I remembering that correctly? Does that ring a bell to you? Does that sound about right?
Right. Ra gave that information in the early 80s when the Soviet Union was in effect. And they said that that type of an experience was being contemplated by those that were in the hierarchy of the Soviet Union, of invading every planet that had value to them. And then they said that we as individuals, spiritual beings, would, as you said, have the opportunity for going within to see how we could help each other to survive such a situation, the spiritual principles that could always be in play and couldn't be taken away from us. So I imagine that's probably what is going on right now with the people in the Ukraine. But that never happened because the Soviet Union fell apart in 1989. And I think Gorbachev was the last of the leaders of the Soviet Union. And so at this time, I don't know if it's the same energies. It could well be, I have no idea, that are still at play in what is now Russia, and that Vladimir Putin would like to see if he could gather together those unions that, like the Ukraine, that were part of the Soviet Union to further the interests. I have no idea if that is the case, but that's, what's going on is probably the people in Ukraine now are having the same opportunity or necessity of having a way of surviving and helping each other. And from what I see right now, it's mostly fleeing the country. And by the way, the country is the size of Texas. And so this is a huge country, and it's got a large population. And this may be something that goes on for a while.
For sure. Yeah. No, and as you said, I think that's something that's worth keeping in mind, that at the time of those the rock contact, that was back in the early 80s, back when I think everyone in the country agreed that Russia was not what we would consider a friendly ally country. And I think it's safe to say that the political climate in that respect has changed quite a bit just in the last few years. We've got a former president who seems to be praising and applauding this invasion of Ukraine. So I don't really want to get into the politics of it. I think we can all agree that that's really secondary to the more important story that's going on right now in terms of our growth as humanity. If you don't mind, I think I wanted to go back to something you said a little bit earlier, just about how so much of our planetary population is made up of people who are incarnated, who seem to have some sort of role in the destruction of their worlds or their planets, or in case of Atlantis, part of Earth, and making it unlivable, if not blowing it to pieces in the first place. It seems to me that a big part of this is enabling all of these folks to do what we might call some karmic restitution, or clean up some karma from that. And I believe Quo has actually talked about this at least a few times and referred to something called a time lateral. Is that something you remember from one of the 1,600 plus channeling sessions that you've done over the years. Do you remember references to time lateral? Do you have
Yeah.
any thoughts, reflections on any of that?
It was one of the more unusual channelings that we got from those Aquo. They suggested that there are negatively oriented entities of the fourth and fifth density that are working very hard to try to help planet Earth join their Orion empire. And one of the ways that they do this is to try to get a hold of people in power and to form an elite and have that elite begin to rule the planet so that it could eventually be added to the Orion Empire. Now, Quo mentioned that the Confederation had developed a plan as an alternative to that, as a way of attempting to keep that from happening. They called it a time lateral, that they were moving all stops out to try to give the population of planet Earth more time to resist, or instead of just resisting negativity, to practice service to others, the positive path. And it was never totally clear how this was operating, but the whole idea was to give the population more time. And at one point, Ra mentioned, when asked, well, how long will it take planet Earth to be graduated to the fourth density? They said, well, it's hard to tell because your people are so volatile. It's somewhere between 100 and 700 years. So they said that the fourth density had actually started back 45 years before we were in the raw contact, which would be about 1935. So we're around 75 or 80 years into that 100 to 700 year time span. So I guess both the volatility of the people of our planet to decide one way or the other, or the time lateral effect of giving us more time, is at play, so that we can't say exactly how long this is going to take. So the whole idea was to give planet Earth's population more time to make their choice of service to others.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. I have lots of follow-up questions that I wanted to ask about this, and I'm just looking in the chat window now, and I do notice there's one question sitting in there right now. So I certainly wanted to invite and encourage anyone who's in the Zoom meeting with us right now. If you have questions that you'd like to ask Jim that are not necessarily related to this topic or related to this topic, any questions that you want, do feel free to put them in the chat window, and I would love to have you be able to ask those questions. Otherwise, if I don't see a lot of questions, I'm just gonna go ahead and keep going on this train of thought, because this is really fascinating to me. If anybody, folks who are watching don't know what I'm talking about, if you go to the LNL research website, then go to their channeling archives in the library, there are 3 sessions that I've found with Quo. One was from February 11th, 2007. Another one was from December 19th, 2005. And there was a third one on May 25th, 2003. And no, I don't have those memorized. I'm looking at a piece of paper right now. But yeah, they're really fascinating discussions. And if I understand correctly, and again, Jim, please clarify if I'm misinterpreting or misunderstanding something. I believe Quo actually said that it was the guardians of this planet who actually instituted the time lateral back near the beginning of third density. I think they said like about 75,000 years ago. It might have been part of the quarantine, but they did it because, according to what I'm reading, they were seeing that the normal pathway that this planet would normally follow from third density to fourth density just wasn't really going well, and the harvest really wasn't looking so great. Partly because I think of their miscalculations with the Martian genetic experiments. And so they actually created a time lateral, which, as I understand it, would be kind of like a parallel timeline to what it was supposed to be. But as you said, it was a chance to kind of give humanity a little bit more time to see if they could make better choices, whether they really want to live in a perpetual state of fear and warfare, or actually live more in love and peace. Does that sound about right to you?
It does. 75,000 years ago was a time during which those Confederation entities that were then known as Yahweh transferred the population from Mars to planet Earth because they destroyed their atmosphere due to warfare. But in their transfer, they also genetically enhanced those from Mars to give them supposedly a better chance of being able to recognize the choice of love over fear, positivity over negativity. And once they got the population from Mars to Earth, they once again walked among them and changed their genetics in the normal sexual reproductive way. So there were two attempts to change their basic ability to perceive the lessons of love. And at some point, the Guardians felt this was an infringement upon the free will of the Martian entities, that they'd gone too far. So what was done then was the implementing of what you've called the quarantine, which basically means that any extraterrestrial entities coming to Earth for any reason would need to be able to go before the Council of Saturn, if they were positively oriented, in order to give their reasons for making contact with entities on Earth and have that either accepted or not. Now, negatively oriented entities would not go before the council. They would look for what Ra called windows, little breaches in the quarantine that would give them a chance to go through. And this would only be very likely negative of fifth density, because the fourth density doesn't have the magical power to perceive and utilize these little windows that actually are there to balance the positive and negative orientation or information given to the population of Earth. So at that time, then, that was when the quarantine was instigated. And those of Yahweh decided that they agreed they'd probably gone a little too far. If you look into Genesis, by the way, you see where the sons of God walked among the humans on Earth and reproduced. And at that time, they lived between 900 and 1,000 years, which is exactly what Ra says the normal lifespan should be on Earth. But because we have not used our catalyst well, we've had to reduce the lifespan so we don't have to undertake so much learning, more than we can possibly assimilate. So there is some correlation there in the Bible as to what Ra had to say. And Yahweh decided to take another name at that time. And it was a name that said, He comes. And so at that time, the negatively oriented entities from Orion decided to appropriate the name of Yahweh. And they said they were Yahweh. And those Martians that had been transferred by the Confederation Yahweh, then the Orion Yahweh began to communicate with them and called them the chosen people, that they were going to become their elite so they could take over the planet through them. So that's the basic background of the positive negative polarity beginning on Earth and why the quarantine.
So it began a long, long time ago. Hence so much of the confusion that we've experienced in the millennia since. Thank you for explaining that. I think that is a long, long, important part of humanity's history that one would be well to go back and look at in the raw context. And I thank you for explaining that for us. I see in the chat window, Linda actually had a follow-up question there that seems pertinent to what we're talking about. Linda, would you like to unmute your mic and ask a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, right now we are a positive fourth density planet. Are you saying that due to the interplay of these different factions that there is still a chance that we may swing into negative fourth density?
No, Ross said that they didn't give any information about the possibility of negative choices. They said negatively oriented entities have been harvesting themselves individually throughout time. They gave Taras Bulba and Genghis Khan and Rasputin as examples of those who had done that. They're saying that the planet itself is now fourth density, and that the population of the planet, those who are going to be harvestable, have at least 100 to 700 years to make that choice and to become a social memory complex of the positive nature. So that's basically my understanding of it.
Then what is the continuing battle on the interplays about?
As far as I can tell from what information we got, and we didn't get a lot more information, the battle is to help the positive polarity to have the time necessary to make the choice, those that are able to make the choice. And it is, as I said, a standoff so far. And that basically is giving people more time. That's part of, I think, what the Guardians were looking for, was to give us more time to be able to make that choice and to exercise our free will. Because right now there is no elite on the planet that is exercising control over people and taking their free will away and making them become negatively oriented. We still have the chance to choose. And in 6512, that very inspiring comment was made that considering everything that's going on, there is always a possibility that our planetary population could, in one fine, strong moment of inspiration, choose the positive polarity. It is not a probability, but it is ever a possibility. So one fine, strong moment of inspiration. And I've always wondered what that might be. What could it be? And I'm wondering if something like the war that's going on in the Ukraine now, if it becomes, so disastrous and threatening, that could the world population say, no, this isn't the way to go. Let's go positive. That's just been a thought of mine, because what would cause one fine moment of inspiration? It has to be something that everybody on the planet was very interested in and very determined to ameliorate however they could. So that's just my opinion.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking the question, Linda. Appreciate it. And thanks for the explanation, Jim. Yeah, I think what you were saying was reminding me of something else that I read in those quo sessions about how, and I guess this actually gets into the archetypical mind. I believe they observed that over these millennia, humankind has been so caught up in this endless cycle of fear and aggression and violence and warfare that it has actually become part of the planetary consciousness, part of what I think could be described as the archetypical mind of this planet, if not this logos. And that so much of this endless cycle of empires rising, empires falling that we've seen over the past 75,000 years is because it's become so ingrained in our subconscious that people don't even realize that they're just slaves to this mentality. And that perhaps what you're describing is that one fell swoop involves people finally coming to realize that, yeah, this is just not the way that we want to live, and we want to live in love and peace and not in war and fear. Does that sound about right to you? Does that ring a bell or something that you remember?
Oh yeah, it does. In fact, it goes back further. I imagine that would include the archetypes, but Don asked Ra, I got that straight here, why the ape was chosen as the form for the third density being. And Ra suggested that the opposable thumb was something that would do a couple of things. It would take the emphasis off of telepathy, which most second density creatures operate by. If you look at schools of fish or flocks of birds, they all operate together at one time. And it would focus on having to develop speech and communication and dealing with other selves. But it would also facilitate the using of tools. And some of those tools could also be weapons. And it seems like bellicosity is some part of what each third density planet needs to deal with. And we got that information when we had the questions about those entities from Sirius that looked like tree trunks that abducted Charlie Hickson and Calvin Parker in 1973 in Pascagoula, Louisiana. And we questioned about that. And they were here because they had evolved from the Sirius galaxy from trees into third density beings, and wanted to know from Charlie Parker what his history was and his ability in war, because he was a veteran of World War II. And so it was like they were studying a movie by going through his unconscious mind, because for them, meditation was the natural state of being. So Ross said they needed to balance that with the study of bellicosity. So it seems like in third density, by the very choice of the ape form for third density beings, that this has necessitated this balancing of bellicosity and meditation, which I would guess would be the two symbols of separation and control for the negative, and love and acceptance for the positive. That's just my thought on it. But that's what Ra had to say about these entities, that they had to study in order to balance themselves. They needed to know something about bellicosity, but not go through it. They would just like watch the movie of Charlie Hickson's unconscious and what he did in World War II.
That is fascinating. And I don't remember that passage, that session. If we were to use the law of one search engine, would it be Charlie Hickson?
Yeah,
Hixson? Is that the correct spelling, or Hick? Do you remember?
Yeah, Charlie Hickson, Hix.
X.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah. And I remember again in those same quote channeling sessions I keep coming back to, they've referenced great ape ancestors at least a few times, and usually it's in the context of this tendency for us to revert back to this fear-based need to hoard resources in times of scarcity to protect our family, our friends, or tribe. It's a very small group oriented life view. Does that sound familiar to you?
There were a couple of instances in the Ra contact where Ra mentioned that when a society turned from barter and the common ownership of property to the money system, that greed and power took over, and it was more likely to be a negative experience. That in Egypt, when it happened, there was the Nile would overflow, and disease and such was passed on through the mold and all of the things that were in the water, causing problems for the people. And Don said, well, I was looking for the more basic reason for this. And that was the basic reason, Ross said, when the entities moved away from the law of one, or the law of love, being able to see each other as the other self or as the creator, and began to get interested in owning property themselves and not sharing it with others. And instead of bartering, I'll trade you this thing for that thing, having money that everybody had to use, then the type of consciousness changed. It was not as a positive. And this greed and ownership and money caused the problems of the sickness and disease that was manifested through the means of the Nile River overflowing.
That's right. I do remember that session. That reminds me, there was something else that Ross said at some point about how there may be a tendency for people to, instead of moving from yellow ray up to green ray, to revert back to yellow ray or orange ray. And I can't remember what the context of that was or what they said beyond that.
Well,
remember that? Is that something does that have to do with what we're talking about?
It does. Planet Earth has been engulfed by the fourth density vibrations more and more since the early 80s when we had the contact. And as we've been channeling Quo since then, these vibrations are difficult for entities to take if they are not willing and ready to face themselves as to who they are and what they need to do to become more positively oriented and to make a choice. And those who are able to face themselves because of these vibrations that are coming in streamings, the cosmic vibrations, then they revert, they go back into the orange ray, which is the individual self, and how the individual selves have very characteristics that are kind of self-centered. It's the very basic place where we first learn how to accept ourselves for having various eccentricities, and we communicate with one another on a one-to-one basis. And then we move on to the yellow ray, where we join with others in the group consciousness. So it's a means of accelerating our growth. But when people are in the yellow ray and these energies come from the cosmos that are enhancing the vibrations of love and acceptance, and they're not ready to do it because they don't know what it is or what it's all about, they revert back into that self. And if you remember, if you're old enough to remember the 1970s, probably not.
I remember.
There were two different types of people that went back to the land. The back to the land movement is what I was part of. And those were college educated hippies that wanted to go back to the land, grow their own food, educate their own children, form communities and cooperate with each other. But there were also the survivalists that went back and bought their property and bought their guns to protect their property and didn't want to have anything to do with anybody else. So there were two different types of people that went back there then. And the survivalists were an example of that reverting to the orange ray of myself, my things, and don't come close to them.
Yes, I do remember that. And yes, the survivalists are very much with us still these days, as are the folks who are the Back to Earth movement. I think anything that can be considered, health food, natural foods,
Yeah.
these days, that's certainly
but they don't have to live on the land now. They can be in the city too.
Yeah, that's true. So do you think it would be fair to say, given what you were just explaining to us, that in years to come, as third density light continues to wane and fourth density light continues to increase, bringing us both love and understanding, that it'll probably serve to polarize people further towards forcing them to choose between the service to others or service to self path?
There's a good chance of that. Just synchronistically today, I was looking at my computer, the inbox, and there was an email from Corey Good and his wife, Sarah Good, I believe. And apparently he's gotten some information from his sources, channeled information that says, as time goes on, the positive will become more positive, the negative more negative, and the crazy more crazy.
It certainly does seem to be that way. But it also does appear that Earth is on track to be a fourth density positive planet. And I seem to recall Quo saying a number of times that as Carla referred to them as the space pirates, the fifth density negative beings who were trying to hijack the time lateral, their chances of success were almost nil. But their hopes are really just in keeping people asleep and trying to prevent people from being aware of a choice. And perhaps what we're doing now is helping people to become aware of the importance of making choices.
Oh, yeah. Well, Ross said that back in the early 80s, there was a phenomenon that I'm sure has expanded, and that was that entities were incarnating who had already made the graduation to fourth density on other third density planets. They were coming here early in order to help with this planet's graduation, because they saw all the dissension and difficulties and separation with people as great opportunities to be of service. So they had what Ra called the double activated bodies. Their third density and fourth density bodies were activated, and they were here to help out. And Carla said that she felt that back from the 80s to 2000, there were kids that were called the Indigo Kids, the Crystal Children. And she said they were systems busters. They found new ways to do things, new ways to solve problems. And it included group action and group efforts. And so I imagine by now that number is greatly enhanced. And there's probably a whole lot more around doing that work. And, very inspiring work it is.
Most definitely. I see that Ken has a follow-up question to what we were just talking about. Ken, would you like to unmute your mic and ask your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Jim. Good to be speaking with you today, and thanks for doing this. Was just thinking a bit. Do you think that the global lockdowns then might be an example of like the entire human collective going through this, or at least having the opportunity to go through this orange ray reversion that you spoke to?
It was the global, what was it, Ken?
The pandemic lockdowns
Oh, okay.
that we've
Oh, yeah.
experienced.
Okay. Thank you. I do. That's just, again, my personal opinion. I think that for these last 2 years, people have been provided with opportunities to be of service to others by doing whatever is necessary to help people stay healthy, stay safe, get their groceries, get to the hospitals, wherever they have to go, to do whatever you feel is within your ability to be of service. It's put the emphasis on how we relate to each other. And are we willing to get the vaccinations? Are we willing to wear a mask? Are we willing to keep distance? Are we willing to do something that might put us a little bit at extra work in order to help other people? Are we willing to change our minds about how we relate to each other? I think all of that has been in play on this last 2 years. So yeah, I really do.
Did you have any follow-ups to that, Ken?
No, I appreciate that response, and it's really interesting to think about under the context of everything that Ra talks about, kind of looking at the world events and reflecting on how these things apply at the individual, but also sometimes at the collective level. So thanks, Jim.
Well, thank you, Ken. I appreciate your question.
Thank you indeed. I am going to look at the chat window, and I see there are a couple folks who have had some questions on different topics and have been waiting very patiently for a long time to ask. So I will ask John Santos. Would you like to unmute your mic and ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, my question has to do with George Van Tassel and the Integratron. That was brought up briefly, I think, in session 14. And when Ra was asked about who gave the information to build the Integratron, Ra's response was there were two contacts which gave the entity with vibratory sound complex George the information. One was the Confederation, the second was of the Orion group. In my own study of Van Tassel's experience, it appeared that there was, I can identify two characters. One was one that he called Solganda, which appeared to be his first contact, and then the other one was Ashtar. Ashtar and the Ashtar command. And my own deduction is that, you know, from looking at everything that happened, I suspect that Solganda was of the Confederation and Ashtar was from Orion. Has L&L Research ever contemplated that possibility, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, that's the first time I've heard the names of the two contacts that he had. So I've heard of the Ashtar command, but the information I got on them seemed to be positive, but I could be wrong about that. Don went out to visit Van Tassel, I guess, probably in the late 70s. He was aware of the Integratron because as a pilot for Eastern, when he came in to land in Los Angeles, he could see the Integratron as he was coming in for a landing. So he got a hold of George Van Tassel, and they spent about a week out there talking to him. And he thought that he was a very purely positive person. And at that time, I don't think that he had had the negative contact yet. The Integratron was still under construction, and it never, though, was ever activated. It was never used for the purpose of enhancing the lifespan. So that's about all I know about it, except now I think that Three Sisters bought it and it's a souvenir shop.
Yeah, that's right. I live about maybe an hour away from there. So I have some interest in that. But thank you very much. I appreciate your information.
Well, thank you for the question. I wish I had more information for you.
That's okay.
Thank you very much. I'm looking in the chat window and I see Wen Su had a question that she's been waiting to ask for a while. Wen Su, would you like to unmute your mic and ask your question?
Okay, can you hear me as well?
Yes.
Okay. If you don't mind me, I want to make a couple of comments first. So it's really interesting to hear about the time lateral thing. Actually, when I heard about the Ukraine situation, this is how I feel. It's like, looks like we need more time. We need more time. I hope there will be more time for us to work it out. So it's great that I heard about it. And another thing I really resonate is what Jim said about the one moment of inspiration. That is my favorite passage. And I feel I know how that can come about, but we can talk about that later. But what I want to ask Jim is, in raw material, they mentioned the book Initiation by Elizabeth Hayek. I think Don said someone in the group has read the book, but he hasn't finished. I wonder, Jim, was that you who has read the book?
Yes, I read it and I provided it to Don to take a look at.
Okay, I read the book and I really liked it. So actually in there, she talked about the Son of God. And she remembered the incarnation when she was the daughter of God, that they are very much like Ra said, they are considered the elite and they think they are the people who actually can be initiated, if I remember it correctly. I just wonder if there's anything particular in the book you remember that, you want to share, that you find it interesting.
Well, she was a very fearless seeker of truth. And as the daughter of the Pharaoh, she entered into various efforts to enhance her ability, I guess you call her psychic abilities, to be initiated. And initiation at that time was considered a very honored, but potentially difficult situation, because the initiate has to be able to drop all of the perceptions of the self that the normal world would look at as being ways of functioning, and be able to accept a new self, let the old self go, and totally be focused upon the desire to seek and serve the one creator within. And a lot of the ways, the times that was done during her lifetime was in the resonating chamber of the Great Pyramid. It's down under the ground, where the entity is put inside this chamber and has the feelings of being buried alive with no chance of getting out. So that gives you the chance of having the old self die away and a new self be reborn. But it could well be a very harrowing experience. And as far as I know, Elizabeth was able to go through that and to successfully accomplish the initiation. And so was there anything else that you wanted to know about that? That's about all I remember from when I read it. It's been a little while.
That's all I want to hear, what you remember of it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sue.
Well, Sue, would you mind repeating the name and the author of that book? I didn't quite catch it, and I think there was a question in the chat window.
The book is called Initiation. The author's Elizabeth, last name is Haich. I guess it's Hayek. She's Hungarian, I remember.
Thank you. Yeah,
also,
thank you for the question. Thank you for the sharing. That's new to me.
Yeah, she also experienced a World War II occupation. Her experience, I think it's kind of relevant to the war going on now.
Nice. On the subject of pyramids, Jim, would you mind explaining a little bit more about the difference between the king's chamber and the queen's chamber? Because I believe one was primarily for healing and the other was primarily for initiation. And the initiation part was sort of the shaman's death type experience that you were referring to. Am I
Yeah,
right?
initiations also occurred in the Queen's Chamber, learning and initiation. And the King's Chamber was located a little higher than the Queen's Chamber, so that the spirals that go through, that intersect twice within the pyramid, could take the one to be healed's energy body or the chakras and separate them so that would be more easily seen where the distortions that were causing the dis-ease or need for healing were. And with that type of a display of the energy body, then the one to be healed could be given the opportunity to accept the healing itself, or its higher self could do it for it. And that way, the one who is in the king's chamber position could achieve healing, usually with a healer there. But the healer had the purpose of giving the red and violet ray combination, that the first and the last chakra, that holds the condition of health or disease in place. It breaks that so that there is a chance to work with that condition so that the one to be healed can take a new configuration, a healed configuration, and move forward from that point on, healed of that catalyst, if it was appropriate according to the higher self, because we all have this catalyst that we're dealing with that gives us a chance to process it ourselves in the what we'll call the balancing process, so that as we work with that catalyst, it's food for our growth, or as Baba Ram Dass said, grist for the mill.
Yes, indeed.
So sometimes healing wouldn't happen if it wasn't appropriate, because the higher self did not feel it was appropriate. The lesson still needed to be learned. If the lesson had been learned, then the healing could occur.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That is a good reminder to go back and reread those sessions and get a further understanding on that. We are approaching the end of our hour, and I wanted to invite and encourage folks who are here on Zoom. If you have any last questions that you wanted to ask, please feel free to put them into the chat window. Otherwise, I think I wanted to ask Jim, just, looking back on everything that we've conversed about today, and looking at the state of the world and looking at where people are at these days, do you have any words of advice or encouragement for folks who are feeling upset, concerned about the war situation in Ukraine, or just feeling tired or drained or exhausted from all aware of what seems to be late third density planet Earth incarnations? Anything you wanted to share with folks before we kind of bring things to a close?
Well, I think that there are people all over the world that are meditating for various lengths of time at all times of day. I think that it's going on all the time to send love and light to that area, and to identify with the people there as being our other selves, as Ra said. They are bearing the brunt of the difficulties now, but they are our brothers and sisters, and we can help them by sending them love and light. Also, that love and light reflects back. Ra suggested whenever we're of service to others, that service to others also includes ourselves, because we are our other selves. We're all one. So as we do our very best to be of service in our daily round of activities, then we are creating a positive energy that circulates the planet. And it's something I think that can counter the negative energies and welcome them in love and light. So I think that it's best not to feel any kind of fear for what's going on, but instead focus on how you in your own life can be of service to others. and how that is a way that you can help any situation in the world to ameliorate, because we are all one. That's just the way it is. And if we get our group consciousness going as much as possible, wherever we are in the positive sense, then we can positively affect whatever's happening on the world scene. So that would be my suggestion. Just see how many different ways you can be of service today. You see somebody on the street, say hi. Say hi. I don't know you, but I say hi and I love you. That's basically it. And meditate and send love and light to those in the Ukraine. Send love and light to everyone on earth that has a problem, that anybody that's in pain. Send love and light to them, that they may be healed. We can each do a great deal. We are our other selves. This is the truth of the law of one. That's just the way it works.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It does remind me of something I was reading about what Ross said about wanderers, and how wanderers all came primarily for two purposes, if I remember common purposes. One was just being radiators of love and light, and other to help the planetary vibration. And the third was just unique to every person who came here with whatever particular spiritual gifts that they arranged pre-incarnation. And that's the beauty of living here, to remember and discover what those are. So I appreciate your sharing that, and I really appreciate your time and gift of your presence here. Was there anything else that you wanted to say before we close this?
Well, it's been an honor being here. It always is. I love the questions people ask. They are so inspiring and informed. I can tell that they're advanced spiritual seekers, and this type of sharing with each other, I think, is something that makes the world go around. Wherever you are, talking about spiritual matters and sharing the best of what you know, and listen to what other people say. Ross said, "Those who have like mind together seek far more surely find." So let's keep sharing and serving each other and being together, and realizing we are all one, and we all are totally imbued with love. And I love you all.
Thank you. And I think I speak for the rest of us when we say we love you very much, Jim. Thank you so much for the gift of your time and your presence with us today, and for all you do in service to others. Somebody in the chat window was asking what I was going to ask about archetypes, and all I can say is we're going to save that for another session, because really beautiful, really important, valuable things, I think, for all of us to learn and to help accelerate our own spiritual growth and evolution. And look forward to hearing what Jim has to share about that. Otherwise, I want to thank everyone for being here. Jim, again, blessings to you. Blessings to all our friends at L&L Research. Blessings to all who are joining us on the Zoom cast today, and blessings to all who are watching this in some other space, time, space. Love you all very much.
Love you all.
Adonai. Namaste.
Namaste.